All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really influential book, Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. We're going to unpack its core ideas, which, trust me, are pretty counterintuitive, about what it really takes to innovate and build a truly game-changing business.
So here's what we've got on tap. We'll kick things off by busting some common startup myths. Then we'll get into the big idea, what 0 to 1 actually means. After that, we'll tackle a pretty controversial take on why monopolies might actually be a good thing. We'll look at how to build one, test those ideas against a real-world failure, and then we'll wrap it up by turning the whole question back to you.
Okay, first up, the startup world's dogma. To really get what Thiel is saying, we've got to go back in time. We need to look at the conventional wisdom that he argues is actually holding all of us back. And it was all born from the ashes of the dot-com crash in the late 90s.
So, after that bubble burst, everyone got scared. And this fear created a kind of playbook for startups, these four, flawed lessons. Basically, the new rules were play it safe, don't dream too big, just kind of tweak what's already out there, and whatever you do, focus only on the product. This became the new gospel for a whole generation of founders.
But Thiel, he just throws that whole playbook out the window. He argues that if you really want to innovate, you have to do the complete opposite. It's not about being timid. It's about being bold. It's not about having no plan. A bad plan is better than no plan at all. And this idea that competition is good? No way. He says it just destroys profits. And sales? They absolutely matter. For him, these aren't just suggestions. They're non-negotiable.
So all of this contrarian thinking, it all leads up to the absolute core idea of the entire book. Let's dig into what going from 0 to 1 actually means.
Okay, so this is it. This is the big idea. 0 to 1 is not about taking a typewriter and making a slightly better typewriter. No, it's about inventing the word processor. It's about that magic moment of creation, of bringing something into the world that is completely, fundamentally new.
And this chart really breaks it down perfectly. You've got two ways the world moves forward. On one side, you have technology. That's 0 to 1. That's doing new things, that intensive leap. On the other side, you have globalization. That's 1 to N. That's just copying things that already work and scaling them everywhere. And Thiel's whole point is, look, we've gotten really, really good at the 1 to N stuff. What we desperately need more of is that 0 to 1 spark. All right, now we're getting to what is probably the most controversial, most talked about idea in the whole book. Get ready for it. Thiel argues that monopolies are actually good. Yeah, you heard that right. Not these evil world-dominating empires, but a powerful force for progress.
And what's so interesting is how he looks at the history of tech. He says we've got the story all wrong. It's not this constant war between competitors. Instead, he sees it as a sequence of creative monopolies. You had IBM with hardware, then Microsoft came along and created a new software monopoly, then Apple showed up and created the mobile monopoly. Each one didn't just compete, it created a whole new world of possibilities. And because they were so profitable, they had the cash and the freedom to invent the next big thing.
And this brings us to what he calls the competition trap. This is what happens when you get obsessed with your rivals. Just think about Microsoft and Google in the 2000s. They were so busy fighting each other, this endless war over search engines and operating systems, that they became completely blind. And while they were slugging it out, Apple just waltzed in and created the entire mobile ecosystem. They both totally messed.
Okay, so if monopoly's the goal, that begs the question, how on earth do you build one? Well, Thiel doesn't just leave you hanging. He lays out a pretty clear four-part framework for doing just that.
So, here are the 4 pillars of a monopoly, according to Thiel. First, you need proprietary technology. That is literally 10 times better than anything else out there. Not just a little bit better, 10 times. Second, you need network effects, where the product gets more valuable the more people use it. Facebook is the classic example. Third, economies of scale. Your business has to get stronger and more efficient as it gets bigger. And finally, you wrap it all up in an amazing, powerful brand. Think about the power of the Apple brand. It's practically a fortress. Okay, so to make all this theory really concrete, Thiel gives us 7 essential questions that every single founder needs to be able to answer. And to show us what happens when you can't, he uses this perfect, really powerful case study, the massive failure of the entire clean tech industry back in the 2000s.
All right, let's look at a few of these, starting with question number 1.
So, the engineering question, it's simple. Can you actually create a breakthrough? Not just an incremental improvement, not just a little tweak. Is your technology a genuine leap forward? And this is where a ton of clean tech companies just fell flat on their face. The most famous example, of course, is Solyndra.
They came up with these really cool-looking cylindrical solar panels. There was just one tiny problem. They were actually less efficient than the boring old flat panels we already had. So it wasn't a 10x improvement, it was a step backward. A total failure on the engineering question.
Okay, jumping ahead to question number 3.
And this one, the monopoly question, is so important. It asks, are you starting with a big share of a small market? See, the mistake is trying to get like 1% of a billion-dollar market. That's a losing game. The right way is to own 100% of a tiny niche market first. You want to be a giant in a puddle before you even think about tackling the ocean.
And what did the clean tech companies do? Exactly the opposite. They didn't aim for a puddle, they jumped straight into the Pacific Ocean. They tried to take on the massive multi-trillion-dollar global energy market all at once. Of course they failed. They were just another tiny fish in a sea full of sharks, with no chance of ever dominating anything.
And finally, let's jump to the last question, number 7. This one might just be the most important of them all. It's called the secret question, and what it's really asking is this. Have you found a unique opportunity that everybody else has missed? What's the important truth that you believe that almost nobody else agrees with you on? That's your secret.
And here's the thing. This was the nail in the coffin for clean tech. The fact that we needed green energy wasn't a secret. It was the opposite of a secret. It was a global consensus. Every politician, every celebrity, everyone was talking about it. Because there was no secret, there was no unique insight. It was just a bunch of companies using the same old thinking to solve a very public problem. No edge, no advantage.
So, you might be thinking, okay, this is great for tech founders, but what about me? Well, what's so powerful about this book is that it's not just about building companies. This whole mindset can be applied to, well, to your own life and your own career.
So at the end of the day, that's the big challenge 0 to 1 leaves us with. It's asking us to stop fighting for scraps on the same old crowded paths. To stop just copying what's already been done, that's the 1 to end game. Instead, it leaves you with this one really personal question to think about. What unique contribution are you going to make? What new thing can you bring into the world that doesn't exist yet? What is your 0 to 1?